Dr. E here from Proactive Healthcare, and I want to take a few minutes here to explain how I help patients with most of their aches and pains based on looking at their posture in 3 different body areas. So we're going to look at the pelvis, we're going to look at the upper back, and we're going to look at the lower extremity and hips. The first thing we're going to look at your core, your pelvis. And the problem people have a lot of times is either their pelvis is tilted too far forward, they call that anterior pelvic tilt, or too far back. And some people can have a combination where one side is forward and the other side is up. So you might get a lateral pelvic tilt there too. So if you ever been to a chiropractor and they say you have a short leg, that's usually what they're talking about. The muscles here are pulling up, and this talk about hip there is going up with it, and then the actual hip joint itself, or hip bone there, goes up with it and makes your leg look short on that side. So what you got to know is there's kind of a crisscross of muscle patterns that work together. So we've got hip flexors down here at the bottom in the front. So this is the front of your spine down here. And then we've got your low back up here. Those two tend to work together. And then you've got your abs in the front here. And then you've got your glutes and hamstrings on the back. So what happens, you can kind of imagine this and visualize this. But when those hip flexors are too tight, they're going to pull down. And when that happens, watch your low back here. It starts to bend back like that. So these muscles are tightening up. So they work together. Usually your hip flexors are too tight, and your low back muscles become too tight. And that's where the problem becomes in here, where you start to tense up those bones. And what happens is this nerve right here, it has a lot of space when I have a nice normal curve there. But as you pull it back like that, you can see that space gets smaller. So it's just a matter of certain movements that will pinch on that nerve. So these people that suffer with these anterior pelvic tilts, they'll come in and they have a lot of pinched nerves. They've been diagnosed with pinched nerve problems, sciatic problems, low back problems, leg weakness, even maybe neuropathy down to the toes, those kind of things. And then what happens with the other 2 groups of muscles is the glutes tend to be too weak, and they will, they help to bring the tension back. And the abs are too weak because they attach right in the front here, so they would help keep the pelvis back too. So you should have just a little bit of an anterior curve, but as soon as these hip flexors get tight, again, from sitting at a computer, because they start up here and they attach down by your legs, so when they shrink, it brings that pelvis forward like that, and you get an anterior pelvis tilt like that. So then the other thing would be the posterior pelvic tilts, and that's kind of the opposite, where the hamstrings are too tight, working with the glutes, so they're going to pull the pelvis back. Stomach muscles get too tight, and then you get a bit of a flat back there, like that. And the problem with that is it adds up too much pressure to the disc. It creates too much of an abnormal pressure to the disc, and the disc pressure starts to push backwards, and then you go to bend over to pick up some, tie your shoe, and that pressure pushes all the way back and pushes up against the spinal cord back there, the nerve tissue back there. And that can create weakness down the leg, and create chronic low back pain, and create hip pain, any kind of pain down the legs. So those are 2 kinds of issues that you might have with your pelvis. Either it's anteriorly tilted too far or posterior too far. And how you can check that is you can stand up and put your hands right on your hips here. And how I've heard it described to a lot of people is that this is a bucket of water, and you see if you can tilt and spill the water forward or backwards easier. And typically, if you have an anterior pelvic tilt, you're going to tilt that water, and it's going to be easier to go forward and spill it out. And you can also look at your side, look at you from the side, and usually your belly sticks out more, butt sticks out more, you get a curve to your low back there, and you get that kind of posture there. Now, the opposite would be for the posterior pelvic tilt. It's going to be easier to tilt backwards, and then you get the flat ramp of butt there. People notice when they do a squat that their butt turns in. They call it butt wink. You try to lay down on the ground, and you won't get an arch. It will be hard to arch your back because it's stuck kind of flat there. That's usually what you'll notice with that. Really tight hamstrings. You can barely touch the floor with that. So we've got a lot of exercises for that, but the first thing you got to do is kind of determine if you have more of an anterior pelvic tilt or a posterior pelvic tilt. In my practice, I would say probably 9 out of 10 people come in more with an anterior pelvic tilt than a posterior pelvic tilt, mostly because of how many hours we sit in front of computers and on our phones and in front of the TV and stuff like that. Now, the next area we want to look at is the upper back. It's a term called hyperkyphosis that comes from, this is the kyphosis curve in the mid-back here, so slight curve forward. But hyper means too much, so it means that curve is going too far forward. So you should have a nice normal curve here. If that curve starts to go too far forward, we call that hyperkyphosis. The problem with that is these muscles are going to get super stretched here as they're much further forward than they should be. You're going to have balance issues because your head's now up in front of the out in front of your body there, so you can have some balance issues there. It makes a lot of tension all the way down the back too, because you're stretching all the muscles that go all the way up your back. So you can have low back problems. It squeezes off on a group of nerves that come out that go on your shoulders, so you can have brachial plexus syndrome, but you can have carpal tunnel, you can have shoulder pain, you can have elbow pain, you can have wrist pain, all because these nerves are being agitated by the poor posture. So again, we have a cross section of muscles there that work together. So what happens here is you got your pec muscles that tend to pull your shoulders forward in this hyperkyphosis posture, and then as it does that, it also creates a lot of tension in these upper neck, upper shoulder muscles there in the traps and levator scapula. So you get a lot of tension up here, so it can create tension headaches, migraine headaches. Because your head is out front, it's a bad angle for your jaw, so it can be TMJ issues, visual type issues. A lot of times, when you're jetting forward like that, your head wants to go down, but we always want to be able to see parallel with the horizon, so we're going to have a tilt up here. So that jams your neck muscles up here too, causing a lot of extra tension there. But the rest of your posture is trying to push you down, so constantly you're having to hold your neck up. And that's going to constrain on your eyes, it can strain on your vestibular system in your ears that cause balance control. So we find 2/10 of muscles up here, 2/10 of muscles there. So the opposite group would be up here. We need to strengthen those deep neck flexors. Those are, you've probably heard of chin tucks and different neck exercises. That's what they're geared at, creating strength and to bring your neck back, and then you also will find weakness in the mid to low traps and mid back muscles there too. So your rector muscles, the rhomboids in there. So you need to do exercises there. So again, we have a lot of resources on videos on our YouTube channel for that. But that's what you're going to want to work on with that. Is relaxing the back and chest muscles, relaxing the upper neck muscles in the back, strengthening the upper neck muscles in the front, and strengthening the mid-thoracic muscles there, and the mid-back muscles for that side. The third area is lower down. And that's almost like this is the most important. This is usually the first thing I analyze with people. I have them stand on 2 scales and see if they're shifting the body weight from one side to the other. We also film everybody walking down the hall. And the whole purpose of that is to see how your pelvis is and how you're walking. Because most people are going to walk 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 steps a day. So if they have a distortion in their posture in their lower body, it's going to create issues all the way up. Just everything has to compensate up if you're having issues down. The biggest thing you see down there is just weakness in the arch and the angle. So you may have flat arches, you may have good arches and still have this problem. But what I see a lot of times is instead of walking straight forward down the hall, if one foot is out, or it pronates a lot. Sometimes it's a combination. So when you walk, you should land right more on the outside middle of your foot, and you should lift off on your big toe. So one thing we look at is extension of the big toe. It should have 60 degrees of extension, because that's what you're going to kind of push off on. And then it gets jammed up in there. It usually tightens up all the tissue on the bottom of the foot. People with plantar fasciitis, heel spurs, heel pain. The other big thing is pronation. So this muscle down here are 2 weak, so as you land, you kind of tilt in, and your foot dips in like that, and you see your ankle actually kind of, they call it valgus, but it kind of drops in. In order to do that, the rest of your body has to compensate. So if I'm walking and this thing lands down and twists, then my knee is going to twist in with it. And so it has to twist, and then the hip twists. So you usually get hip tension here, tightness, you'll get irritation to the knee. So I find probably 90% of my knee problem patients, we correct the ankle and the knee feels better after that. So it's a posture problem below the knee sometimes they're the hip that we have to fix in order to get the knee pain to go away. So we've got a lot of exercises on how to strengthen the arch of the bottom of the foot and how to correct that. That's the big thing we look at there when you walk down the hall, is are you pronating and are you tilting the foot out? So something simple you can do at work or at home is just set up a camera, watch yourself walk down the hall and see yourself walk back, see if your feet are facing straight, and then look at your ankle and see if it's tilting in. The other big thing is the stability of the glute medius and minimus up here. It's very important, even though you don't really realize it. Every time you take a step, you're standing on one leg. And so you have to have really good one-leg balance. So that's an easy test you can do too, is you stand on one leg and try to hold it for 30 seconds. And what I look for is a shake in the ankle. So when you have poor ankle stability, you'll start to kind of shake like this. And sometimes right away, sometimes after 5 or 10 seconds. And then you might also find you start shaking up in your hip. So if I stand like this, my ankle starts to shake, or up here starts to shake, when I have a weakness up in my glute medius, and I may have a weakness in my ankle too. So those are the big areas that we look for with that, but that's very important because if you're walking, again, 10,000 steps a day, and your hips having to turn in, it's going to affect your pelvis, it's going to straighten out maybe your low back there, it has to tense up to, just because your brain thinks it's not stable, and you might fall down. So these are the 3 main areas that I look for with every patient that comes in to kind of determine where we should start. And I find so many things get better if we can correct the pelvic tilt, the hyperkyphosis, and then the stability of the hips and the ankles. So again, we have lots of resources on our YouTube channel. It's Proactive Healthcare MN. Just look for our logo. And I've got exercises for hip flexors, glutes, low back, abs, a whole series for hyperkyphosis correction, a whole series on ankle stability and hip strengthening. So hopefully this helps. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon.